What is going on, party people? What is going on, the city beautiful? You know what time it is. We just had a bunch of holidays. 4-day weekend for some, 5-day weekend for others. But we're back to the business of what I like to call the Soul Show with Rome, aka the Sound of Orlando. And like I said, last week was kind of slow, but we had some great people on. Shout out to Granddaddy South, who came by and talked about our city in a good way and some of his legendary stuff. Shout out to DJ Doo-Wop, my brother, who came through and talked about the early days of hip hop. And, just so if everybody wants to know what is going down with this show is about the culture of hip hop that is not only in Orlando, but that is being brought to Orlando from the entire world. And so when we have people on that are not from our city, we're bringing these people on so that, one, the conversation is happening with all of us. You get to hear how these legends came to do what they're doing. We're sharing this with you. This is a service for our city. Our city is important. We have hip hop here. And people that watch this show understand what hip hop means. It's not just about our city, it's about people beyond. And so with that said, I'm honored and privileged to have this brother come on tonight. He is part of the Hip Hop Museum in D.C. He has done legendary work with all kinds of groups, Grandmaster Flash, you name it. He is a writer, a documentarian. He is going to describe hip hop on a different level, on a different scale than what you're used to or what you've seen so far. Because, like I said, we are talking about the entire story. We're not leaving anything out. We're not trying to, we're only going to tell the side that you know me, so I'm going to just tell my story. No, man. This is our story as a collective, as a community. The hip-hop community deserves this. So, without further ado, let me bring on my brother. Yes, the legendary J. Quan. Let's go, my brother.
What's going on, my brother? How you doing?
Man, pleasure to have you on the show. There is so many questions when it comes to hip hop. The show literally would have to be a mini-series to actually do it.
Yes,
so we're going to try to do our best here and cover a lot of ground. So if I ask some questions and I'm like, okay, on to the next one, right. I'm just trying to cover a lot of ground because
Indeed.
If you're about hip hop, you're not only a person that, is maybe involved in it, but you're also a fan of it too.
Yes.
So we're going to try to touch on a lot of topics. But before we get to that part, give a little description of your background and how did you become an official with this hip hop museum in DC? Let's begin with how'd you get into hip hop first, though. Let's start there.
Well, I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia, so I got into hip hop like most people outside of the tri-states. I heard rap music first. Most of us who are not New Yorkers, we weren't at the Fever and the T Connection or any of those New York Bronx spots. Primarily, we got our history of the so-called culture through via the music. So like most people, I heard Rappers Delight, literally changed my mind, blew my mind, knew I wanted to do this. And then the subsequent records that came after, started collecting records. And then hearing Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel, that record back in '81, the first record with scratch mixing on it, just took it to another level. Well, I'm like, wow, I got to figure out what is this music, because at that time, we hear words like the culture now that are kind of cliche, and it is a culture, but we never used those words back then. It was just, right. We got, for us, we got the music first, and I had to put these pieces together like a puzzle. These guys were talking over already recognizable music. I was already in the records way before rap records came out. So when rap records came out, I really, it was magnetic. I had to learn how to do this. Right. And from there, when I heard Grandmaster Flash's record, I had to learn how to do that. How is he scratching these records? How is he making a mix like that? And, you fast forward through the 80s, I became an MC probably seriously 81, 82, taking the existing rap records that were out, which were basically disco based, the instrumental of different Sugar Hill records and other records, writing my own rhymes, mixing some of my stuff with what they already said, much like the MCs were already doing in New York. And by 87, I made a regional hit record here in Virginia. By that time, you had Public Enemy and groups like that on the scene. Long story short, they would come through VA. My record, Chuck D heard it and others heard it. And Chuck D took it to WBAU, which is the college station at Adelphi that he worked with, and got a little regional airplay, some national airplay, some international airplay. And then you fast forward a few years or a decade or so more, right around 95, 96, when the internet started to bubble, I looked at it and I said, wow, this thing is going to be big. This is when the internet was brand new. There was no Google, there was no social media, no YouTube. And I vowed at that time, I'm going to learn how to make websites, because I know when hip hop hits the internet, now you got to realize this was a time when if you did a search, there was no Google to search with. I think there was Excite or something like that. If you did a search, nothing really came up under hip hop. I think maybe a KRS-One article, like one article on the whole internet. It was that new. And maybe a Run DMC article. And I knew at that point, okay, they're not going to touch on the Cold Crush when this thing blows up. They're not going to touch on the Furious Five. They're not going to touch on the Fantastic and Infinity and all the mini groups that came before recordings. So I had to jump on everybody. I learned around 95, 96 how to make websites. I started putting up information about those kind of groups, the groups that came before rap records. Got the attention of people like Curtis Blow early on and Tila Rock and some of the pioneers. Started doing interviews on the internet. Then you fast forward to modern day, people who run museums have seen my work. And the DC Museum reached out to me and asked me would I be a curator, a historian, a minister of information of sorts with them. And I've worked with the Bronx Museum on their timeline briefly. So, it really just putting the information on the internet, people have come to me and I've become embraced as a hip hop historian.
And that's amazing. I mean, when you say historian,
yes, sir.
One thing about hip hop that for many of us that started in the beginnings of hip hop, we all kind of feel like we're historians in it.
Certainly.
Right? Because, a lot of these rappers are baseball cards. You know what I mean? Like you got that,
literally,
the albums. Like you got this, that. So when you say that, it's so dope. And shout out to the Minister of Information, which was Professor Griff in a lot of ways.
Indeed. Yes, right? PE. Yes, sir.
And that is so important because the narrative of hip hop is everything. We watched it in many ways be manipulated, used as a way to wedge, our unity, because our unity was unlike all other music. Like it brought so many people to the table, and we watched the narrative be used in positive ways. So describe what it was like when they asked you to go and curate in DC the national plate. This is where the Senate, the White House is. What did that mean for you, and what did that mean for hip hop?
Well, for me, it was special, but it may not. As I describe it, it may not be what some people expect, because it's not like I was sitting around just kind of doing this on a small level and then DC happened. It moved in increments. So the first thing that really was surreal to me was back in 95, no, probably 96, 97, when I started putting these things on the internet, Curtis Blow came to my website and he liked what I was doing. And he said, hey man, you can interview me. I love what you're doing, because the internet was brand new. So, to have Curtis Blow reach out to me and then get him on the phone and talk to him. And then after that, to talk to, people like Melly Mel and then Kumo D and then Grandmaster Caz. And this thing is snowballed. I think the first person that reached out to me was a brother named Troy Smith from Harlem. And he's a tape collector. And he had many tapes from the days before rap recordings. And he reached out and said, hey, man, I love what you do. You really, your knowledge of rap records is unmatched. We could be a duo. I could talk about the tapes before rap records. You could talk about rap records. So those things were a little more powerful because, to grow up idolizing a guy like, Melly Mel, and then be able to get on the phone and do a 2 or 3 hour interview with him, or Kumo D, that was very special. And then, to take my things from written form, which they were in the late 90s, and to transform them into these little, documentaries that I narrate, and then have like LL Cool J see the one that I did on him and actually call me and thank me for doing it. To have Dougie Fresh see a piece that I did on him, to have Melly Mel. I never called myself a hip hop historian. I was much too humble. I was like, oh man, that's heavy. I'm not going to call myself that. But another real milestone for me was I recorded a song with Grandmaster Caz and Grandmaster Melly Mel back in 2003. And when Melly Mel came to VA to record with me, we had several conversations. But when I showed him the memorabilia that I had, he said, brother, you're like a hip hop museum. You're a historian. And I said, nah, man, I can't take that title. And he said, well, whether you want to be one or not, you're a historian. So Grandmaster Melly Mel christened me a historian. I embraced that a little after he told me I was a historian. I never was I never claimed the title until he told me that I was. And then my life started to, it got to the point where it took up so much of my time with interviews and curating stuff and rating albums and breaking down lyrics. So much of my time was spent doing this. I'm like, well, yeah, I am a hip hop historian. I have to be for the amount of work that I've done. So to finally answer your question, when the DC Museum called, and when the Universal Hip Hop Museum called, or anybody else reached out, it was a great feeling, but I felt it was deserved. I was a little less humble, not arrogant, but I was a little less humble, because it's like, well, hey man, I've been doing this online for 20 years. So, I never felt like, hey, it's about time somebody see it, but I did feel like, hey, this is well deserved. My work has paid off. I've covered these things. Somebody sees it. Somebody sees value in it. So I was honored to go to DC and induct Cannabis, one of my heroes, and induct the great Diabolical Biz Markie, and peace to Biz Markie, and get well soon to Biz Markie. Induct the Big Daddy Kane and Scarface and Melly Mel and Grandmaster Caz and Trouble Funk. And, I probably inducted, 50 people into that, museum, a little less than that. Disco B from Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, DJ Cool, so that is really been surreal, and I felt like it was deserved, because I did put the work in.
Well, look here, man. Do you hear Orlando what he just said? I mean, that whole entire statement will probably take a few watches to kind of dissect.
Yes, sir.
But look here, man. The president of the United States has a presidential historian. A lot of rock and roll has historians in place. For hip hop to have historian like yourself, it is a labor of love, right? Like at the end of the day, you care about hip hop.
Yes, sir.
To chronicleize it, to bring it to fruition in a way that if someone forgot what this album cover looked like, or what this moment in hip hop history
yes, sir.
was, you were making a way for that, and that's something. Regardless and to have Melly Mel co-sign that, I mean that's
surreal. Surreal.
That's everything, because for a lot of people, including myself, Melly Mel made me want he confirmed all my suspicions of hip hop, and I was like, it's a rap. I heard the message. It's a rap. So shout out to Melly Mel on that.
Certainly.
But I just want to say, brother, that it, following history requires an amount of love for what you're following that is just uncanny. There has to be, you have to be curated. I mean, because who does that, right? Like, there's so much time that goes into that, your entire life.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I was doing it before I knew I was doing it.
Right.
I didn't just jump into this, man. When I'll show no shame. I'm 50 years old. So when Rapper's Delight came out, I was 8 or 9 years old. Right. So from that moment on, from the time I heard that record, it totally changed my life.
Right.
I went from having posters of the Incredible Hulk and DC Comics and stuff on my wall to replacing everything with rap records. I gave up playing football. Honestly, my schooling suffered because everything was buying these rap records, and the few magazines that cover rap music, I bought every one of them. This is by the time, like Rakim said, I was a fiend before I became a teen. Before I was a teenager, I was already collecting magazines and everything I could get on rap music. And I'm not even in my double digits yet. I'm barely in my double digits. So even at that time, I was becoming a historian, not knowing it. I just thought that this was something that I loved immensely, more than my peers. My peers, everybody loved the rap records, but they would get the record and play it, and it's cool. They put it on tape, they dance to it, they learn the words. I always took it further. I learned the words. I read the credits. I read who mastered it. I read who produced it. I memorized the producers. I found out everything I could about the record label. It was much more, I wouldn't say obsessive, but the research that I did, it was much more than just being a casual fan. And it's always been like that. So fast forward.
Break up? How many relationships break up for the lack of love, right? Like you're describing even a deeper meaning of something. Like you love hip hop so much that it didn't matter whether they're paying you to do it or not. You wanted to know everything about it.
Yes, sir.
That's not something you learn in school. That's something that, regardless of your school, you don't have to have the greatest education in the world. All you have to have is love. And if you love something good enough, it's just amazing what you learn and become a master of just by the art of loving it that way.
100%.
It's amazing that for you, I mean, because like I said, I prefaced this question because I was saying like everyone that I kind of grew up with, in one way or another, we all felt like we knew when this record came out, we knew who the record label was, what the master was. Like we all felt like we were these hood historians.
Yes, sir.
But even with that said, the step up to what you're saying, the time that it requires to be up on everything, that's a life labor of love, man. I mean, you deserve all of that, brother.
Yes, man. Sometimes I'm humble to my own detriment, and for years I would, kind of shy away from that. But I really have to say I do deserve it. I mean, when I do my lessons, my videos, I might do an hour lesson where whether I'm interviewing somebody or whether I'm just narrating a certain, I did a piece on the Fresh 3 MCs, right? To a lot of people, that's a random group. They had the song Fresh. Nobody knew what they looked like. I hunted these brothers down for years. I finally found them, sat down, did a piece with them, took the time to find pictures of them, break down their lyrics, talk about their stuff. And people appreciate it, but what they don't know is that piece that might have been a 45-minute or hour piece, it took many hours to put that together. And it's not like it was on Netflix and I got a big check for it. I do this because I love it. Sometimes I spend more money than I make on it. I don't get paid a lot of money to do what I do. I think this year I've probably profited more monetarily off of this than I ever have. And that still ain't enough to do nothing like bragging about. I truly do it because I love doing it.
Do you think hip hop takes a beating when money becomes the end all be all. Do you feel like, to what you're saying, to dovetail off of what you're saying, what you've done, it's priceless, but you had to do it even if there was no money to support it. Do you think hip hop as a culture right now suffers from the idea that everything has to be monetarily based in order to show, i.e., what you're doing?
100%. And I don't even know if "take a beating" would be the word that I use, even though you're definitely correct with that. It's like it becomes less of a culture when money is the thing. I grew up in a time where you would do it for free. And people would pay to do it, to get on the mic.
Yeah.
MC Chill had a song called MC Story. That's my man, MC Chill from Cleveland. He had a song called MC Story, and he said, to love it so much, you would do it for free. You were sworn to be born a supreme MC. Like, really, like, I've heard cats like the Treacherous Three said that they would perform, and this is when they had records out. They perform and they get paid with pizza. Like Bobby Robinson, their labor owner, would give them pizza, or whoever the venue owner or promoter was would give them pizza, and they was fine with it because they just wanted to get on the mic and rock the mic for the crowd. Now this is a multi-billion-dollar industry now, so that's changed where a lot less people would do it for free. But to answer your question, yes, when money is the only motivating factor, and there is a little love for it, and more like, I'm going to get rich, I'm going to blow up. Money was never a thing for us doing this. It's a thing now because I'm a grown man and I've been doing this for 40 years of my life. So yeah, I have to get paid for my time now because I can't continue to, I'm doing it for the love. I did it for the love for my whole life. But when being an MC, or whether you're a graph writer or whatever, but mainly MCs, because the MCing part of it is what generates the most money. I'll go even further and say money and contractual things destroyed the whole thing. Because even from the rap point of view, in the beginning days, it was all about the DJ. Even the name of the group, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Grand Wizard Theodore and the Fantastic, Chase and Tone and the Cold Crush. It was always the DJ's name first. The MC was a side thing, just to talk about how great the DJ was. As soon as a record contract was drawn up, there was a separation between the DJ and the MC. Once records started blowing up, a lot of times the DJ couldn't tour with the MC group, or the record label didn't want the DJ; they just wanted the MC. So immediately at that point, there was a separation. And some of the founders, like I've heard Grandmaster Flash say, that when the first rap contract was signed, that was the end of it. Yeah, a lot of people won't agree with it, but culturally, he's saying that was the end of it, and that's not far-fetched.
What are some of the groups that stood out to you over the span of hip hop culture? Maybe you can name one or two that stood out for you as it was not about the money for them, and they stood to their core beliefs and artistry. What are some of the groups that kind of surpassed that crutch, if you will, by, because part of the idea is, if you're money orientated, sometimes whatever you're paying for no longer has value, right? And then what do you do then? So a lot of the groups that kind of maybe had the money for the studios, they had the big budgets, or these big contracts, and were able to kind of buy their way in, if you will, with marketing and promotion. And then there was artists that were that didn't get the airplay, or didn't get the artists, the promotions. What are some of the groups that stood out to you when we're talking about money versus the culture?
I'd say most of those that came out before the early 90s, there was a time when, rap music was the stepchild of especially black music. I mean, even other R&B artists would never have collaborated with rappers. Rap was almost embarrassing to a certain segment of the black listener, which is where, you know, monetarily this thing started, you know, with these mom and pop record stores before it got, you know, anywhere. You know, it was a little rare to see Melly Mel on a record with Shaka Khan. And it was people that didn't even like that back then. So I say on a broad level, everything before probably 90, you know, those people had to be really dedicated to it, because you weren't making, you know, the multi-millions there. You know, you wasn't getting a Jay-Z $1 billion because you got a label. You know, it didn't exist yet. But the standouts to me would be definitely those that did it. Listen, man, this thing is so, it goes so far back that groups like the Funky 4+1 and Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five were doing this at like the Audubon Ballroom in different places. And promoters and record people came up to them for years and said, hey, I can put this on record. And they turned them down because they said nobody would buy this. We're talking over somebody else's music. Nobody would buy nobody rapping on the record. They were offered money and turned it down. They didn't think it would work. So just the standouts to me, I say the cats that carried the speakers and carried the records and carried the crates before there was even rap records. So that would be people like the Funky Four and all their different incarnations of that group that they went through. The Furious Five, the Treacherous Three, you know, and there are other groups, even Run DMC and groups like that. You know, the monetary part came in around that time, but when they first did it, they never thought that they'd be making records with Aerosmith and be millionaires. I'm sure they wanted that to a degree, but that was not the motivation to do it. The motivation was to get on the mic, get your touches on the mic, and let people hear your rhymes. So I say most of the people of that first generation, outside of the parody people who were coming in and making joke records and trying to be funny, the real cats that were really trying to make a artistic piece of expression, I think they all did it for the love. And further than that, I say the other so-called elements, the graph artists and the B-boys and the DJs, because they didn't get a chance to really come along for the ride the same way the MCs did. I say all of them had to be doing it for the love, because unless you were going to be on a movie like Beat Street or something like that, you weren't going to make a lot of money like, you know, like the rappers were starting to do. So I say that whole first generation, I said that they had to be doing it for the love.
How important were artists like Blondie, Malcolm McLaren, the like, when they took on hip hop culture? Given your history, how do you feel that did they help push the culture forward, or what was their impact to you?
Yeah, I say they helped push the culture forward, and it was a little different back then. You know, we didn't have the word culture vulture. It wasn't a mainstream word back then, and you didn't just throw that word. Now we just throw words out. You know, we throw the word hip hop. Hip hop is an overused word. It's one of the most overused and misused words ever. When Blondie made Rapture, we didn't think, oh, she's spitting, she's nice. But it wasn't a whack record. I mean, Flash, she immortalized Flash and Fab Five Freddy. Flash took that record and immortalized it on his own record. You got to remember, Deborah Harry of Blondie, she was going downtown to the Mud Club and these different clubs and hanging out with the Funky 4+1. She got them on Saturday Night Live in like 1981, the first time rap was ever on television. So she couldn't have been a culture vulture, because she didn't come in and say, hey, I'm going to do rap shit, I'm going to get on TV. She gave it to them. She made a record and said, Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly. Flash is fast, Flash is cool. So that was dope. Malcolm McLaren, he's been called the culture vulture, and McLaren was a genius at what he did. The stuff that he did with the world's famous Supreme Team and on his own, the sounds that he took, the sampling that he did, you can't deny, you know, the Buffalo Gals 12-inch or the world's famous Do You Like Scratching EP with world's famous and all of those songs. Those songs are brilliance. So, you know, I'd be hard pressed. I have a very rare piece of footage of Malcolm McLaren explaining to people in the UK how hip hop worked in the States, and how these young black kids were taking 2 copies of a record and it was going to be the next big thing. I see them as, they moved the culture forward, but they also were showing those who had no idea what the culture was. They were translators of the culture. So the dangerous part comes 40 years later.
That's
yes.
perfect.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The dangerous part comes now, when history will, you know, I read stuff on the internet where people say the first rap record ever was Rapture by Blondie. You know, that's the dangerous part, because we know that's not true at all. So it's not it's not Deborah Harry's fault or Malcolm McLaren's fault that history once again is shortchanging the people that you look like you and me, largely, that started this. It's not their fault, but that's that's the dangerous part about it, is when you get to modern day and people try to once again, claim something that way. And that's why I do what I do. Other than loving it, the other part is, I saw early on, my parents told me early on how rock and roll, used to be a music that was made by people that looked like us. And it's hard to believe as a kid, because I grew up in the MTV era, and rock and roll looked like, Slayer and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. But when I started studying Big Mama Thornton and listening to the Beatles and people like that talk about Howlin' Wolf and all these blues guys, I was like, oh, wow. And I saw that happening with hip hop 20, 30 years ago. I saw the potential where somebody could come and redo a narrative to try to say that we did less than what we did. So much of my motivation is to make sure that the story is told properly, because I'm a researcher, but, it was my life too. I don't have to do a lot of research because I was there. My going outside every day was with a boombox, tapes, microphones in my window, making beats. Every drum machine that came out, I had it, learn how to program it. I never have to say I am hip hop. It manifests itself through my actions, man. I'm very much hip hop.
We know hip hop was born in New York.
Yes.
But what about groups like Tough Crew, MCs like MC Breed, Too Short,
Sure.
Steady B? How do you see that impacting and broadening this idea of hip hop that was so kind of centralized? It was like a central bank for the early beginnings. What is your opinion on what that did for hip hop?
It greatly broadened what was already there, especially on the rap side of it. A lot of times we talk about hip hop, a lot of times we're talking mainly about rap music, even though we say hip hop. As far as the rap part of it, it broadened it greatly. You mentioned Philly. As much as I love the DSTs and the Flashes and the Theodores and all the great New York DJs, you can't deny the Cash Money, Jazzy Jeff, and Tap Money, and Miz and the guys in Philly. Those Philly DJs are just a special breed, and they advanced greatly on the things that were laid down before them from New Yorkers. So what if you just discounted Philly and didn't have the Philly DJs in there? And see, luckily, I'm blessed. I don't use the word blessed a lot, but I'm blessed to be from Virginia, because it's a funny place on the map. My brother Chris Brooks like to call it the northernmost southern city. We're at the top.
Right.
We're mid-Atlantic. We're not quite south and not that north. So everything came here. So I grew up on Shy D. I grew up on Steady B, as well as all the New York stuff. I grew up on Egyptian Lover and Uncle Jam's Army. I grew up on Too Short, as well as all the New York stuff. So it was a mix. And I'm literally what I call up the street from DC. So I grew up on Trouble Funk. The middle school that I went to, when we had our little parties, we still called them discos. Trouble Funk was the soundtrack. The original live version of Drop the Bomb was what we listened to. And in the song, they shout out Richmond, which is my hometown. So it was a gumbo for us, and the electro records, the stuff like Planet Rock, the stuff like Al Nafish by Hashem, the Nucleus records, the Clear, by Cybertron. All of that was on my tape, along with Thomas Dolby and the Thompson Twins. Come on. It's like there was no separation of it. All of it was great music to me.
And shout out to MC Shy D, who's going to be on the social.
It's my brother.
And Tap Money, shout out to Tap Money. He's going to be on the social as well.
That's my brother as well.
But you literally recalled my entire childhood, because what I used to think was crazy, as now that I'm older, I look at my childhood as what a blessed moment in life, because I was able, to your point, growing up in Florida, we were exposed to it all. You would hear Grandmaster Flash, and then you would hear Jam Pony Express, Rock Clear, or we hear Luke, or we hear Breed.
Pretty Tony. What's up to Pretty Tony? Fix it in the mix. Come on, man.
all of these Gucci Crew, we would hear all of
Yes.
this blend. And
all of the bass music, yes.
Right. And for a lot of people that may have grown up, there was always this idea that bass music wasn't hip hop. I always disagree with that because those early bass records were just as hip hop to me as Planet Rock was, or as Clear was. That first Two Live Crew album, half the album was hip hop. You know,
well, it's funny because before the Two Live Crew became vulgar, they were so hip hop. Records like The Revelation and What I Like, and then when they were on Loop Records, the Two Live Is What We Are. First of all, those Miami DJs or MCs had incredible DJs. Mr. Mix, shout out to Mr. Mix, incredible on the wheels.
Gonna be on the social too. Yes, love it. Yes.
What's up to Mr. Mix? Shy D had incredible DJ Man, DJ Toomp, who went on to produce Kanye West and other greats. In the modern day, Toomp and DJ Man were incredible DJs representing Shy D when he was repping Florida before he started repping Atlanta, Georgia. I mean, it's not the same hip hop that comes out of New York tempo wise, and lyrically they may not be trying to be as poetic as what New York is, but you can't say it's not hip hop. Right. I mean, you listen to Mr. Mix and some of the stuff. Listen to What I Like, the dub version of What I Like, and tell me that shit ain't hip hop. Excuse me for cursing. It ain't hip hop the way Mr. Mix is rocking them records, man. Mr. Mix is not to be played with. I don't care where you from. Mix will put you on your backside. So yeah, man.
Is literally responsible for some of the dopest production. He's one of the most underrated producers.
Yes, he is.
And he's created these classics that, I mean, you listen to it. Nothing ever to me sounded like Two Live Crew anyway. Like there was these renditions to try to keep the same theme, but the sound, like I literally, like I grew up in Orlando, but that was the sound of Miami. It was. And it was the sound of Orlando. You couldn't even go anywhere in Orlando and not hear Two Live. Like that was it. And
I can imagine
artists that when we're talking about hip hop, and like I said, the idea that hip hop was waiting for me to come out of New York and kind of fully blossom. Like I think about the beginnings of New York and what it did for hip hop. And then all of a sudden you have this kind of nationwide sound expansion. Like it's like the Big Bang. Like Philly had their own sound. Cleveland had their own sound. Michigan had their own sound. Chicago, LA, Oakland, like all Dallas, Houston, like they all had their own unique sounds to them. And I think it was not until that point that you heard, this kind of expansion that hip hop. It was kind of like it was like 16 years old, and then boom, it became a full grown ass adult. Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, man. One of the problems that I see with it is because I got to word this properly so it's not misconstrued. Hip hop in its original form was never meant to be commercial. This was young inner city urban poor kids looking for a way of expression, right? And many people came along and said, hey, I can put that on a record, I can put that on a movie, and then it became big. But that advance that you just described of it snowballing and becoming so big, that was because it wasn't prepared. We had to make the rules up as we went along. That's why the first few rap records, there were lawsuits because this thing was never meant to be on a record. I told you, the pioneers, they rejected recordings. So, somebody takes Good Times by Chic and somebody raps over it, and then there's immediately a lawsuit. All the first rap records, there were lawsuits that had to be settled on the low because nobody thought that these records would go outside of New York or the boroughs. And then, they become worldwide. So the problem with hip hop, we never really had a real stern definition for what hip hop is. Like I said, when we talk hip hop, even in the conversation we're having now, we're talking about rap music. We haven't mentioned the other elements, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's what we do. We talk when we say hip hop. Most of us really mean rap music, and I like to specify. So that's one problem.
But let's go there.
Okay.
Your point, culture in general. Do you think we, as the culture, were targeted because, for example, before hip hop came out, they were doing covers. I mean, how many times was I heard it through the grapevine done? Right? Like, how many times was certain rock songs done over and over? And it seemed like the litigation behind that, at minimum, was like quiet. If there was litigation, they solved it. No. But when rap started taking the music, but then doing a whole different song over it, do you feel like the culture was targeted in an unfair way based on the precedent that was already in place? Or do
No, I can't.
Fair?
No, I kind of don't, man. And the reason that I say that, and I know a lot of people in hip hop will say it's popular to say the opposite. No, because first of all, nobody knew anything about the culture. This is what happened. Nobody outside of New York. They knew the beginnings of the culture, but basically, Rapper's Delight comes out. I'm not even counting Kingston the Third. That was original music. Rapper's Delight comes out. Bernard Edwards and Nile Rodgers hear it and say, "What the hell? It's got to be a joke that's on the radio." Then they hear it 100 times a day. Then It's on Soul Train. Then it sells 1 million records. Them guys didn't know anything about what the culture was. They knew that, hey, this is my bass line somebody's playing, and they didn't get clearance. When those covers you talked about, heard it through the grapevine, just for an example, I mean, that was all through the same label. You had Gladys Knight and the Pips do it. You had Marvin Gaye do it. So, the business was taken care of. Hip hop didn't take care of business because, again, it never thought that it would do anything. The rappers didn't want to make records, and the business kept going after the rappers, and finally somebody did it and they made a record. So we made up the rules as we went along. So I wouldn't say they targeted us. I'd say you can't use somebody else's music and not give them credit. Now it's easy as a hip hopper. I'm a sampling producer, and I would tell you that, hey, look, Bob James, he may love hip hop, he may not, but if he hears that you made a record and most of it's Nautilus, it's only fair that man wants his check. That's not him being a hater.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I anticipated it, and that's what.
Sure.
And you did exactly what I thought you were going to do, which is fucking go. You said they handled their business. They were on the same record label, so they allowed the artists to just concentrate on the artistry. So yes, Gladys Knight did it. Marvin Gaye did it, and there was a business model already in place to take care of what was being done.
Exactly.
So when I say target, I'm saying for a lot of poor people, this is what hip hop represents, this rags to riches story. Most people don't know the business side coming into hip hop. So it's almost like the record labels, they kind of knew what was going on. When you listen to Paul's Boutique, that album will never be done ever again because that album is insane, right? But how do they get away with it? There was business handled in the background to kind of keep everyone quiet and keep it to a minimum. That's what I'm saying when I say target.
I understand what you're saying.
Have that representation from the business side until things started getting really important. Your Andre Harrells, your Puff Daddies, people that, okay, we're not only going to sign the artists, but we're going to make sure we handle the business too. And I think for a lot of people that were, mom and pop labels, people that were just trying to get a chance, were sorely hit by this idea that, and shutting things down from a sampling aspect. I think we were hit harder. And
I think we were hit harder because
the representation.
Yeah, I think we were hit harder because our usage was more blatant. Like,
Right.
there are not a lot of people that would go like, okay, so Roger remade Grapevine. You know, he didn't just jack it. You know, he his lawyers and his people went to the proper copyright holders and publishing holders, and he remade Grapevine, and it was done that way. You know, as much as I love hip hop, you know, you can't just run with somebody's stuff. I've been in the studio with people that have said, "Hey, I'm going to sample this record," and I'm like, "Hey, make sure you write down. You know, you're doing a lot of sampling there. Make sure you write it down." You know, somebody wanted to sample "Fly Like an Eagle," and he was like, "Well, who made it?" I was like, "Oh, you know, that's Steve Miller Band. You know, you need to know that." And the cat actually told me, "I don't care nothing about that. I'm taking it." So now you got different. Now you got people like Pete Rock and Large Professor, cats like that. These guys are scientists. Lower Finesse. These guys are scientists. They know what record labels do. They respect the music, even though they want to take these horns or whatever. They know where to look for their horns. You got that class of people. Then you got a class of people that just think something sounds good. They don't care who made it. They're not going to get the proper clearance. So I say I don't think that hip hop. I think hip hop was hit hardest because our whole, and again, it goes back to, this was never supposed to be a recorded medium. This was some backyard barbecue, having some fun, kids poor doing something, and a business model was created in response to that. So as you went along, you said, okay, well, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that. So inherently the record business is already shady anyway. Whether they're doing remakes or not, they weren't properly compensating the real writers of the work even before hip hop. So when hip hop comes along and these cats are not even old enough to sign the contracts, some of your favorite first rap records, the rappers weren't old enough to sign the contracts without their parents. So here comes some 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. Somebody shoves a contract in their face, says, "Come to my house to sign the contract." And there's a Jaguar and a Benz in the yard. Of course, the kid wants to sign the contract. So, yeah, the record labels didn't care. And again, they didn't think that this thing would ever be quite as big. I think the Sylvia Robinsons and people like that, I think they had some foresight to know this could be big. But, hey, man, by 79, you had probably 20 different independent rap labels. A lot of people think that Rapper's Delight and King Tim III were the only records that dropped in 79. In 79, you had almost 20 rap records, and it was fly-by-night labels, and everybody just wanted to get a check real quick, and they didn't care whether they cleared the sample, or not. So, yeah, I think, hip-hop has to still catch up to that of, hey, look, I like this beat, but let me do the right thing. I just did a piece on the Honey Drippers, right? That made Impeach the President, one of the most sampled records ever. And I had to say the drummer's name because the world sampled from these guys and nobody knew who played them drums. So we got to do a better job of uplifting the people that we use their music. People know that Clyde Stubblefield played funky drummer, some people, but we don't know who played the drums necessarily on Synthetic Substitution and all those records that's been sampled hundreds of times. So that's something that we got to do as so-called hip hoppers. We got to do a better job of citing our sources, so to speak.
Absolutely. And that requires community. You just spelled it out. The conversations, the informedness. That's what R&B had. R&B had kind of their community already built. They started out in the 60s, and the community around them, just like the jazz players, the community was around them. They had a supported community of people that will all had interest in the pushing forward in a real way. There's artists like Lord Tariq and Peter Guns.
Yes.
Don't get nothing for Deja Vu. Fabulous. Get nothing for Breathe. That's, we suffer as a people just for lack of information.
Definitely. And it's interesting that you brought up Lord Tariq and Peter Guns, right? So I think they sampled a Steely Dan song.
Right.
Kind of like how Originators sampled my man, the Blue Eye Soul cat from the Doobie Brothers, Michael McDonald. And I think it was the same deal with that. Like he wanted 90% of the publishing.
Right.
And that sounds really bad. And hip hoppers would say, "Oh, Michael McDonald's a hater." But if you listen to the song, like 100% of the song is Michael McDonald. It's a loop, right?
Right.
So I get it. He could have been a little more, hey, I'll take 50%. But I mean, it's his composition, so he has the right, if he wanted to say, I'm taking 100%, you don't get nothing. Or he could have just denied the sample like Prince used to do.
Right.
Prince didn't let too many people sample him. So I don't have the cliche hip hoppers response. So I've heard people actually disrespect Bob James and call him a hater because he goes after people.
Well, nah, man.
It's like, I'm not that kind of hip hop cat, and I've sampled Bob James immensely. I've sampled
Peter Piper, Mardi Gras. Are you kidding me? I mean,
yeah.
Without Bob James signing off on that, we have no Peter Piper, bro. Like,
Right. So if people don't go and get the right clearances, and then like the way that Bob James started finding out about his records being used, he had a nephew that was into rap, and he said, hey, Uncle James, this is your record, and people have been using Bob James since way before Run DMC. I mean,
right.
Rockmaster Scott and the Dynamic 3 used it for His Life. They played it over. Some of the first rap records were using an interpolation of Nautilus or Take Me to the Mardi Gras. Crash Crew used Take Me to the Mardi Gras long before Peter Piper, or at least years before Peter Piper. So Bob James missed all of that. See, rap flew under the radar for such a long time that you could get away with here and there, doing something. And then, you had your landmark things with the Biz Markie samples and all of that. And, the game changed. But that's always been a thing. I think we don't take into account that these lawsuits happen because, again, there was never a template. We had to learn as we went along because this was something we were doing at block parties to have fun. And then it became a multi-million-dollar business, and we had to catch up and establish rules after the fact.
You hear that, Orlando? He's dropping bombs in the city. Welcome to Orlando, brother. You're doing us well. That translates now. You said culture now. DJs, how do you feel, to your point, with these new kind of ways of policing what we play, how that hits the DJs and why certain DJs are able to play your D-Nices, your Jazzy Jeffs? How do you feel that same sampling? It's now Facebook that's the sampler. It's now Instagram that's the sampler. Taking every song. How do you feel that is impacting hip hop? Is that a good thing or a negative thing?
I think it's negative in general. Technology really changed the game, man. In the mid '90s when you started getting, the fact that you could download music and upload music and trade music over the internet, it changed the entire face of the game. So, you fast forward now to social media, and like you said, some DJs are able to upload something and not get, any stress over it, and others, as soon as you upload your stuff, it's taken down. It goes back again to, hey, man, these are the copyright holders. Universal Music, they own a lot of music, man. Sony, they own a lot of music, and they're going to say, hey, you can't play that song. They're actual artists who play their own music and get it taken down because they don't own the rights to it. The label does. So the artist says, hey, this is my song. And the label says, yeah, but you don't own the rights to it. So I think that's awful, but that is where we are with technology. And I think that some DJs are allowed to do it. It's the popularity you have. I mean, when you got, Michelle and Barack Obama, listening to your live stream, you might get a look, it's probably some kind of kickback. I'm not saying it's for sure, but when you get to the levels of some of the people you named, these are what you call celebrity DJs.
Right.
So they have connections where, they probably have endorsements or whatever it is. Hey, you can play this music if you, play at least this, if this much of your playlist contains, artists from whatever. I don't know that to be fact, but it would only make sense that that's the case. We're talking about money on a different level now than the 80s money and the 90s money. This is real money involved here now. So, when you money and culture, it's hard to so-called keep it real and keep it with the culture and all those other cliches we like to throw around. You got people waving large amounts of money in your face. So I say overall it's bad for the culture of hip hop. It's good for the individual that's getting the big payday, but it leaves everybody else behind.
Now, he said culture. We're talking about hip hop right now. What do you feel about graffiti artists, street artists that were in the early days? They were our heroes. They described, what we were going through in certain parts of the city, and now they've kind of put them, they've kind of blew them up in a way. Like they kind of just, is that commercial? I'm talking about the Basquiat, you name it. Shout out to Danny Rivera on check-in. He was a dope graffiti tag writer himself.
Peace, peace.
When we're talking about the art, is it being gentrified right now, or
yes? All of it's being gentrified. But if you go back, you could see it coming. If you go back and look at Wild Style, it actually on a very micro level, it happened there. When you saw the main character Lee Quinones going through what he was going through, and then he gets invited downtown to the art world to do the canvases and stuff, and in the streets, think that he's selling out. I mean, that was what, 82 for Wild Style, 40 years ago. We kind of foresaw it. The bigger this, it's very ironic. This, again, the word culture, that everybody hated except young people. Nobody liked it. With Don Cornelius, that whole, and to me, it was the fact that many of our parents didn't like it. It made it more attractive and powerful to me. It was a rebellious thing where it really felt like this was our thing. It was us against the world. So like our parents don't like it, the radio don't like it, but they gotta play it. It made me go harder for it because it's like really was us against the world. Right. Fast forward to now, and it's like everybody seems to love it. The same people who said it won't last a year, and then they had this, they had to eat their words after 10 years, and after 20 years, and after 30 years. Now those same people are multimillionaires off of it. So yeah, it's all gentrified. Everybody loves it now. And anything that everybody loves, some kind of way it had to be homogenized in the process, and everybody loves it. I loved it when everybody hated it. I still love it, of course, but there was something different happening when everybody put their nose up at it. And all of us, we said, yeah, you don't gotta like it. This is our thing. We're gonna take the world over. We took the world over, but like at what expense? That's like we don't have any ownership in it.
Do you feel the kids right now feel that way about us? Meaning the new generation and how they took hip hop and have made their own version of it. Do you think that they look at us as the proverbial old heads that don't know what they're talking about? And are we making Jordan, LeBron comparisons when we talk about the greats or people that are doing it? Do you see any relativity there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that some of the younger heads see us as that, and I mean, we are that. We are old heads. I mean, respectfully, we are. I think that's a cycle. I think the younger generation is going to always have that energy of, hey, you don't know, this is our thing. We had it with our parents. Our parents grew up to Motown and funk music and the things they grew up to. And when rap came out and some of them didn't like it, we said, hey, this is our thing, and you can't tell us anything. I think that's repeated. I don't necessarily agree when people say, people try to make things simplistic when most things are a little more complex. So what I mean is people will say, hey man, let the young kids have their music. Our parents didn't like our music either. That's true, but you do have to point out the differences. And there's a relevance to the differences. The differences was our music was a music that we created from nothing. Our parents didn't like it because they weren't supposed to. Just like I suppose we're not supposed to like their music necessarily. But the difference was this was a brand new music that our parents weren't supposed to understand. I would probably have been disappointed if Don Cornelius had liked rap music. There was nothing that a probably 40, 50-year-old man at that time should have liked about it. He saw it as, wow, I'm used to interviewing the OJs and the Isley brothers and these people that can sing, and you guys are holding yourselves and talking on the mic. The fact that he didn't like it, again, it made it more powerful to me. So there was a thing of us against them mentality. Today, this is not a new music that people are doing. Some people from our generation feel like this is a music that's already established, and that some people are perhaps misrepresenting what we started. Now, whether that's true or not is another whole debate, but I see that as a difference. But what I was going to say earlier, and I'll make this real brief, a big problem is that every other kind of music, there's subgenres, and those subgenres are clearly labeled. So you have classic rock, you have heavy metal, you have soft rock, you have progressive rock, probably psychedelic rock. you have classical music, you have R&B, you have funk. They all fit under umbrella, but they're separate under that umbrella. With so-called hip hop, everything is bunched together and expected to coexist and all be the same thing. So if you say, yeah, I love hip hop, well, does that mean that you love A Tribe Called Quest and Outkast and Grandmaster Flash and Latifah and Kendrick Lamar? Like, a lot of that is very different. And the Yin Yang Twins. So we've never put those subgenres there to say, okay, this is MOP and this is Mobb Deep and this is this kind of hip hop and this is Outkast and this is this. Now that might sound separatist, and maybe it is, but maybe it should be, because we are the only genre that puts everything under umbrella. And if I'm telling you I love hip hop, you don't know what hip hop I love. You know, I might love a certain kind and not necessarily love that. But rockers and even jazz, you have progressive jazz, and then you had classic jazz, you had big band jazz. You had 6 different genres of jazz. So if I tell you that I love Donald Byrd and Bob James, that don't mean that I love Kenny G or some of the big brass stuff coming out of New Orleans. We have a communication problem in hip hop where we don't define things properly. We haven't even defined hip hop properly. So you can get nothing but confusion when you say you represent something and you don't even have a good definition for what you claim to represent.
He just literally dropped a bomb on the city of Orlando, bro. Are you kidding me, man? Like, look here, man. That is what we call hip hop, man. You are just telling the truth.
I appreciate you recognizing that.
Subgenres separated by cities?
Say that again.
Are the subgenres separated by cities? Shout out to my man. Question.
Indeed, they're separated by cities. They're separated by regions. And that ties into when people talk about, like, I hate the GOAT conversations and the top 5 conversations because they never have context. First of all, those are all relative things. Everybody likes what they like, okay? So if I have this saying, I say, if you have a conversation about the GOAT or the top 5 or whatever your list is, if you don't clarify what represents being a GOAT, it's like playing Uno but not saying what rules you're going to play by. You're going to play by, Milton Bradley or whoever puts the game. Are you going to play by those rules? Are you going to play by the street rules? You can put down 4 draw 4s in a row, or are you playing by the manufacturer who says you can't do that? When you're having a conversation about the GOAT, maybe I think the GOAT is a person that's lyrically this and this and this. Maybe you think the GOAT is a person who sold more records and has a better stage presence. How can you have that conversation if you don't first say, okay, this is what we have as the criteria for being the GOAT? So to your region thing, I think we are separated by region. I think we always have been, but it's been a lot more. Like I said, the region I'm in is very much in the middle. So again, I had the influence of Go-Go, the influence of Shadi, the influence of Egyptian Lover, definite influence of New York, the influence of my own city and the surrounding areas. And it was all in a gumbo, and I respected it all. I think today there's a lot more regional pride. So I tied that into the top 5 thing because a lot of the GOAT and top 5 thing is just like a sports thing. You might say somebody's the GOAT only because they represent your city. Yeah, we in the Midwest, and so we like Nelly. He the GOAT. You're not, and I'm just give you an example. They're not necessarily basing it on skill level or whatever they think the GOAT is. Right. It's a pride thing. Like if you're from Chicago, you repping the Bulls.
Right.
If you from LA, you rapping the Lakers, and it's like that with hip hop. Many times it's like, hey, we the South, we the best, blah 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 blah. And the funny thing with these things is some of these things can't be compared. Even some of the contests that you have coming up now, the comparisons of this person versus that person, some of them are mismatches to me. Just because you rap doesn't mean that you can say Nas versus like one of the cats from De La Soul. It's like they're 2 totally different MCs. It would be like putting a welterweight against a heavyweight. It's 2 different weight classes of MC, not based on who's better or who's not, but 2 different styles. And we just throwing these people together. This person versus that person. It's like, do they have anything in common? So yeah, to finally answer your question, yeah, the region that we are separated regionally. We're separated on a lot of things in hip hop. Yes, unnecessarily so. I would say.
Well, I normally do a top 5 dead or alive, And I have to remind folks when they do it, because they ask me all the time, what do you mean by that? And I say, it's your list. Whatever that five is to you, it's your list. It don't matter. You're not asking. I'm not asking you to prove to me what your list is. It's your list. I don't know what inspired you. I don't know what you think is great. But I also think by doing that, it gives you insight into the person. Because once again, you still describe the big problem that we have, which is communication. We don't talk about some of these things. The insight of us is assumed on a lot of levels.
A lot of assumption. Okay, so for me, right? I don't have a top five because it will probably change. You know, some days my top five might be whatever. Then I might, depending on what week you ask me, I might throw somebody out and say, no, I'm feeling this person this week. Maybe it'd be better to have a top. You know what would be lovely if instead of saying the greatest of all time, you realize the greatest of all times means since everybody who ever rapped, right? So if you're a person that started listening to rap in the 90s or the mid 80s or even after, how could you even qualify to say the greatest of all time? You haven't heard every MC. So or then when you say the greatest of all time and the people you list, they're all from like 1995. It shows that to me, it shows your listening is based on a bias almost. So, okay, five of my favorites are Rakim definitely, Cool G Rap definitely, Big Daddy Kane definitely, Melly Mel definitely, and Grand Poobah one day and Chubb Rock another day. But it's so many people that's not in that list. LL deserves to be on the list. So five is almost impossible. In 40 years of rap music, with so many great MCs, dozens of them, to say your top five, I can't do five. I could probably easier do 10. But Grand Poobah would be in my list of 10 MCs, maybe five some days, because I like lyrical cats. So Poobah I like clever lyricists. And he was a very clever lyricist. So he would be right there. Me telling you that means you understand my top five, so you won't be offended that you ain't mentioned whatever your favorite dead rapper is.
Right.
There's reasons I like Tupac. There's reasons that Tupac, I don't compare Tupac to Biggie or Tupac to Nas and people like that. It's like this is an art form, and I approach it as such. So the same way that when jazz lovers talk about the way Coltrane played their horn, and they talk about the way Bird played his horn, you can't always compare them. And I think a lot of, as much as like rap cats, we do want to be historians and we know it all. I think a lot of us haven't done enough research into what we claim to love to really research and say, hey, yeah, I like this cat because of this. I've actually had conversations with people that say, well, yeah, you said Rakim, but Rakim don't got no good stage show. Rakim doesn't have an energetic stage show, but I would probably be going for his wordplay when I say that he's one of the greats. So those are arguments you would never win. It's like the argument of who's better between, Jordan and whoever you're comparing them to that day.
Right.
I think you're probably better off doing that because you have stats and things to actually compare. There's no stats for rappers unless you say record sales, but I mean, Hammer and Vanilla Ice sold a lot of records and nobody ever says they're the GOAT. So, I mean, those are hard conversations to have. And, sometimes it's a waste, man. Sometimes I feel like just enjoy the music. Why does it have to be, you put 10 albums up? This is a social media driven thing. One's got to go. Which one? Sometimes it's like, none of them got to go. I'm all great albums. Why you gonna make me pick an album that's got to go? It reminds me when we was it reminded me when we was kids and we would be like, who could beat the thing or the hook? Who would win? And it's like, you'd never come to an answer,
Speaking of wordsmiths and MCs,
mm-hmm.
do you think Eminem is being treated fairly when we talk about this thing called hip hop? And will he be in the books, if you will, when it comes down to some of the best that ever did it? Do you feel he's somewhere in that class of lyricists? Or because maybe him being white, that gives him an asterisk. Because you hear these discussions sometimes, and at times I at times I just don't even feel that it's fair to the culture. But you hear it, and you hear these things, and you're like, dude, he's insane. He's he's an incredible MC. Um, does that take a dollar out of somebody else's pocket? Probably not. I don't think his record sales, you know, even add up to his talent. I think he was able to kind of do what a lot of MCs did. He heard Redman, heard a little bit of Tretch, and kind of came up with his own take on that. And he's been successful behind it. What say you?
I'll answer that as briefly as possible. I think Eminem is an incredible wordsmith. I don't always like. Somebody said a Hulk will win. What's up, John Lee? He probably would, but I think that Eminem is an incredible wordsmith. I don't think he's always an incredible deliverer of his rhymes, and I think that has gotten. I won't say gotten worse. I don't like that word. It's digressed over the years. So when he first came out, he was doing Lyricist Lounge. He was very underground. He had a certain kind of delivery that was a little less caricature and cartoon-like. But the words he was saying, the way he stretches words, the way that I always say you can find a good MC is you read what they wrote, right, in your own voice, and see if it still sounds dope, right? If you read Eminem rhyme, the way he connects words and split words up, he's a student of Rakim, clearly, the way he, the multisyllabic and, all of that. He's clearly a student of the greats. He's a student of Master Ace and all of the greats. And it shows in his writing. I think he was much better with his delivery. Some of his more recent stuff, his delivery, it seems like he's kind of almost a caricature of himself because he does the kind of whiny, like voice, and it becomes irritating. But his earlier work, it's no way that you can't say that he's not one of the greats. But the thing that happens with the tricky thing about that is because this is hip hop and this is America and the history of race and commerce and product that we've had in America, right? And that goes back to what I was saying about just the history of America and music. And let's be very transparent. Black hip hoppers have always feared that somebody's going to come and take this from us. Black people in general have always feared that somebody's going to come and take something from us because it's happened. It's history, right? So when the Beastie Boys came, it was like, oh, I hope they don't get too big. I love them, but they might try to say they did it first. So we've always had that fear. It's something we don't talk about, but let's be transparent and say we ain't worried about it with Vanilla Ice because, Vanilla Ice was Vanilla Ice and we knew he wasn't going to come and take anybody's legacy. The Beastie Boys we worried about a little bit. Eminem was one of the first, to reach the mainstream and be like, oh, he got credibility lyrically, whatever. And we didn't want our thing to be taken again, historically. If you look at, I don't know if it's the 5 Heartbeats or the Temptations movie. I think it's the 5 Heartbeats movie. But basically, back in the days, a group like the OJs would put a record out and there'd be a white family on the beach, for the record cover. And when I think it was the 5 Heartbeats, they asked the executive, hey man, why this white family on the front? Why we can't be on the front? And what the white record executive basically told him is, look, if you want everybody to buy it, you got to, it can't be you on the front. It's always kind of been like that with rap. We always felt like somebody else that comes and do what we've done forever that is a different color is going to take this over from us, right? So look how many MCs you had. 99% of them have been black. They've been great over the years, and they never got mentioned in GOAT conversations. And then Eminem is one credible white MC that is mentioned in all the GOAT conversations. So it's a tricky thing, but I will never take away from him the fact that he is a great MC. And yes, he is an MC. He's a great MC regardless and despite of anything. Again, I don't like his more recent stuff because it's a little cartoony, but I like R.A. the Rugged Man as well. He's, I don't even look at him as a white cat. This cat can spit. He just happened to be a white dude. It's plenty of white cats that could spit, but for some reason Eminem was, I was watching Coming to America the other day, and when the dude said, "Yeah, Rocky Marciano, that's day one. That's day one." You know, you feel like that with Eminem sometimes, like, "Oh boy, you know, they got to come pull him out. That's day one." So that's that's just like we talking about America and race and commerce and creativity and ownership. It gets a little hairy, but I'll never take anything away from Eminem as a wordsmith. He's an incredible wordsmith.
Right. Well, I mean, he dropped another bomb on Orlando again. You said it like it was. You just said it plain. Communication is key. You said the truth when it came to it's fear, and it's not a fear that's what do you call not rational. It's because it's happened.
You're right. Yeah, there's historical precedent for it.
It's a natural response if you feel like this is the one thing we have, and someone says, "Oh my God, no, 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 he's not great. He's not great." And then you got some people that just go too far with it. You know, they're just completely impossible. He's not good at all, which is completely stupid. I mean, you're saying that as a knee jerk reaction to try
Right.
to feel like we don't want this take. This is all we got.
Right, it's funny. Richard Pryor one time, he made a joke and he said one of his on his stand up. He said, you know, white people wonder why black men grab their nuts all the time, and he said, yeah, well, this is the only thing we got. You can't take from us. We got a whole. So as funny as that is, there's a microcosm of truth in there, man. We've all in hip hop and just modern society we're not known for being independent thinkers. We're very much, you got to go along with the narrative that somebody else said. Like when you ask me about hip hop catching a raw deal, most people would say, yeah, man, this is Clear Channel did this. We had this victim mentality, but you got to look at both sides of it. There's some things that we didn't catch in the 80s that happened in hip hop. And the reason why mainstream rap is the way that it is today is because a lot of times we weren't on our job in the 80s. We let a lot of stuff get by in the 80s, and then a whole generation came up on a certain kind of music, and now it's the norm in mainstream music. I don't blame Radio 1 and Clear Channel for that. We can't keep having this mentality of because somebody said it's that person's fault. Yeah, a lot of stuff is somebody else's fault, but this is hip hop. We claim to love it. We claim that it's ours and we want to protect it. In the 90s, we dropped it. As hip hoppers, we don't do everything right all the time. You got to be able to look in the mirror and say, yeah, man, in the 90s, we should have caught this. We shouldn't have let this get as big as it did in the 90s, because now you have a whole generation of kids who have no context.
Right. Absolutely, man. I mean, that is so important for most relationships is the context. People see the money, but they don't see how hard you worked for that money. They don't see what you gave up for that money, or they see the fight, the infighting, but they don't realize that a lot of the stuff has been built up over time. No one was talking to each other. Then they just found out that maybe they wasted their time. Or maybe this was like a complete bamboozle, and then you have rage. So you touched on a lot of points of this thing we call hip hop and why it's important to keep an open mind and to your point, you don't have to be a historian to what you're doing, but you'd be surprised how much getting to know what you think you love so much even more will do for your life. Putting these rappers into context, putting these producers into context, the DJs. I love having DJs on the show because, to your point, we're silent in a lot of ways, and a lot of people don't know what DJs go through to DJ. It's not just I bought some techniques and I got me a whole, terabyte of music. Same with artists. It's not easy being an artist.
No.
hip hop is one of those things that you go from being probably extremely unfortunate that if you're successful, you go to extreme success, and there's kind of no in between a lot of times for people to even catch up and 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 kind of digest any of it, and that's why it's so easy to kind of kill careers or kill this idea of what this person was. Not to laugh at Nate Robinson, but that's a great
Everybody else is.
right, but that's a great analogy. We've known him as this great kind of basketball star, slam dunk champion. He goes into this ring and he's knocked down, and the world applauds kind of that. We love seeing him go up just as much as we love seeing him come down. And
even more so today. I think social media makes it. I compare it to like we're like like Rome. We're like modern day Rome. We're all sitting in the theater watching the lions tear people apart. I think much more so today than ever before. Dougie Fresh had that song. I think it was on his World's Greatest Entertainer album where he sampled Michael Jackson, and he said everybody loves a star when he's on the top. But nobody comes around when he starts to drop. Like we love to see, that's a cancel culture. We love to see the fact you're never going to work again, even though you're only accused of saying something to somebody or doing something. You haven't even been to court yet. You lost your job immediately. You'll never work again. We love it. We love to see the cat get knocked to the mat because as long as it ain't us, it makes you feel good about yourself. We can say, that cat got knocked out in a couple minutes. Because hey, at least it ain't me. It's somebody I can make fun of, and it's funny. The memes are funny, and the situation was funny. But the fact that we have social media, we can share it instantaneously. It brings out the worst of all of us. Not that particular situation with the boxer, but all of it. We want to see the worst of everybody.
Right, and you mix money and power into that, it just creates this kind of pot which people tend to create these, like a lot of, like you hear this all the time about the country. The country is made from an idea.
Yeah.
Hip hop is an idea, right? And so with any idea, it can go off the rails. How many times you started a track, you're working on an SB12 with an MPC, you started with this one thing, but by the time you hear the end result, you probably went 12 different places to get to that one place. Hip hop is at its core, at its best when it does that, and at its worst, all at the same time.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And I think everything we're talking about can go back to, I hate to keep repeating myself, but when you consider the fact that, a lot of people take offense when I say they don't like that wording. This was never supposed to be an industry. This was literally, imagine when we went outside as kids and you played hide and seek and Skelly and all the games we played, the games we made up, playing in the creek and, what up, pitching pennies, what the games we just made up on the fly. Imagine somebody coming in and offering you all this money for that, and it becomes this thing, and now you got legal stuff or whatever. That's literally what hip hop was. It was no rules to it. Isn't it amazing that, I always put a double dutching in the conversation with hip hop. Not that it's an element of hip hop, before the real hip hop has come from my head. I'm not saying it's an element of hip hop, but I'm saying it's birthed from the same neighborhood things. Hip hop was just neighborhood things that poor urban kids did to entertain themselves. But the key that locked them all together, it was always unorthodox. You're supposed to sing, not rap. You're supposed to touch the record like this and not touch the surface of it and scratch it. You're supposed to use a spray paint can to paint wicker chairs, not make art with it. You're supposed to dance, upright, not on the floor. Everything we do is against, how it was supposed to be done. So jump roping, right? These girls took 2 and 3 jump ropes.
It's a protest. It's a protest to the condition
against what the norm is, right? So instead of taking 1 jump rope and doing like this, these girls took 2 jump ropes and got 3 and 4 girls, and they in the middle doing all kind of crazy. that's what we grew up with, just like girls playing jacks and stuff. Now double dutching is in the Olympics, and the people who do it, they don't look like me and you. And I hate to bring race into it, but it's America, and you can't not do it. Growing up watching girls double dutch, the people who are that's on TV now in professional competitions doing double dutching, those girls never double dutched when we were growing up. The girls that double dutched in our neighborhoods, they look like me and you, bro. So everything that we do, and John Lee said Malcolm McLaren made a double dutch. That's why I say Malcolm McLaren, I don't think he was a culture vulture. I think that he, just like Charlie Ahern and others who saw these things, they thought they were incredible, and they thought that, hey, somebody needs to bring them to light. Those people ended up getting rich off of those things. So,
that wasn't, once again, we're talking about the industry as it was. The protection, the community was already in place. The infrastructure was already in place for those other subsets to deal with it in a real way. Whereas for the poor kid who was just glad to get the record deal, if you had a lawyer, you were lucky.
You know what? To speak to what John Lee just said about Malcolm McLaren making that double dutch record, this is again why I say he wasn't a culture vulture, right? He was talking about a group of girls called the Ebonettes, right? Yep. in that song. I never knew what the Ebonettes was, and I'd never heard of them. If not for him doing a video for that song, and on the 12-inch jacket, he's got the Ebonettes double dutching on the front, and they got their little hip hop shirt with the iron-on letters with the Ebonettes on it. So it made me go today and go back and Google the Ebonettes, and I can see all this different stuff about these girls had competitions the same way the B-boys did. And again, I'm not saying it's hip hop, but it's definitely birthed from the same poverty and the same necessity is the mother of invention. That's where hip hop was born from. Like, right. We needed to do something because we needed it. We were poor.
We needed it.
So somebody took Flash and Herc and Bam and Theodore, whoever did it first, whatever. They said, hey, let's take 2 copies of this and extend it. And at first the DJs talked over it. And then the DJ said, well, no, I need to get the attention off me. Let me get an MC to do it. So again, there was no industry for that. This is just us having fun the same way the girls are having fun double dutching, the same way we play dozens, right? Back in the 90s, there was an MTV show where they were playing dozens. Everything we do as poor people becomes $1 million culture, and we almost never benefit monetarily from it.
Right. And to your last point, I love what Malcolm McLaren did for hip hop. I love what Billy Squier, Tom Tom Club did for hip hop. Aerosmith. I mean, all of these contributions, because it was just like the equivalent of the community centers that hip hop started in. It was all of these kids saying, "Oh, that's dope. That's fresh. Can I do something?" And everyone trying to just have some sort of expression involved as children do, which to me is probably, once you take all of these other things out of it, race, background, it was the one thing that I completely believe made me see humanity. Hip hop allowed a space that didn't require you to have what the haves had. It was designed for everyone. So the rich guy could get involved. But most importantly, the have-nots could get involved.
The have-nots created it. And the wonderful thing about it, and again, specifically the rap music part of it, was that Grandmaster Caz coined a beautiful phrase years ago, and it's on shirts and everything now. He said hip hop didn't invent anything; hip hop reinvented everything. That's so beautiful because somebody took 2 copies of a Bob James record. Listen to "Take Me to the Mardi Gras." Most rap cats ain't never heard the whole record. We only heard the first few bars of it. But somebody took what we think is the best part of that record, the best part of Big Beat, the best part of Impeach the President, the best part of Funky Drill, the best parts, and we isolate it and make a whole song over it. That would be like, a chef taking only the best recipes and putting them all together in one meal. You got a super meal. That's what hip hop is. It took everybody's stuff and said, hey, I respect your 3-minute song, but I only want that 2-second piece in the middle. That's the beauty of hip hop. But it's hard. Not that we need to convince anybody of that, but we don't always put that first in hip hop. We don't, when we're explaining to others what hip hop is. I think that there would be more respect for it as an art form if we explain to them, hey man, we took a record that nobody cared about that was made in 19 whatever, and it was a limited run of 200, 300 copies, and we took that and we chopped it up and we made something brand new with it. Listen to this. I think because of rap being so, the urban spin that it took in the late 90s, it became so thugged out and gangster or whatever. We let that take the front seat. So when we present hip hop or we present the rap music part of it, we're presenting it sometimes with a little negative spin on it. So it's hard for others to see the art of it. Not that, some people would say, hey, we don't care what they think. But what I'm saying is
the barriers a lot of times. We present the very thing that, once again, when I first heard hip hop, it was so inclusive. It was almost like a hand grabbing me to pull me in. It was so inclusive. Where, to your point, the thug narrative or the militant narrative or it's only African narrative, pro-black, all these things that kind of kept people out or gave people reason to kind of be, okay, well, maybe I don't belong there. That first run, man, that late 70s, 80s is about as inclusive as you could have possibly gotten without literally having a damn orgy. You know what I mean? Like, it was just so, if you're poor, you get it.
And the most creative. Yes, and the most creative. I mean, I'd say at that time, one reason I think that those of us who feel that modern day rap, especially mainstream, suffers, I think many of us feel that it suffers because you got to remember, man, rap music used to change like clockwork every 3 years. You had the first generation of records that were basically based on disco records and funk records that already existed. Then in 83 to 86, you had the drum machine era with your Run DMCs and your Jekyll and Hydes and the late great Pumpkin producing a lot of those records, the stuff on Profile Records, Rockmaster Scott and all of those guys. Then from 86 to 89, you had the so-called golden era where sampling came in and sampling technology was made affordable, where you could, get you a nice old SP12 or Insonic or whatever you got for a few $100s. And then the ultimate breaks and beats, you don't have to search for breaks anymore. The sampling became an issue, creatively. And that was from 86 to 89. And then from 90 on, jazz, every 3 years, it was a whole new sound. Today, if you turn the radio on, they're doing the same thing original concept did in 1986. You still got the 808 drum machine. We haven't done anything brand new in a long time. At one point, every 3 years, we were doing something brand new. And we've been kind of stuck on the same thing for about almost going on 3 decades.
It sounds like the space program, right?
Sounds
like the space program, right?
Don't it?
We went to the moon. All my conspiracy theorists out there blow up. We went to the moon, and then it was like, okay, we're not going anywhere for the next 40 years. But to your point, I mean, part of that, I keep pounding it in the sand, bro. One thing that you're doing by not only being an historian, a documentarian, doing your shows, one thing that the show is providing is this beginning of the communication, the conversation.
Yes, sir.
The talking to one another without feeling that my discussion, buries your discussion. The idea of informing people without making them feel like you're their God, or informing people in a way that allows them to come to a place for themselves. Like, all you're doing is allowing people to think. And I think we've seen this business model work on so many other things, whether it be in business, whether it be in, life in general. But as far as the hip hop community is concerned, we have a lot of room that we can improve on by coming together as a community, beginning the conversation, if not citywide, statewide, and nationally. Instead of it being these center pockets or centralizations of thought, we should be coming together as a national infrastructure and saying, you know what? Orlando's got a voice. Let's hear what they think. Cleveland's got a voice. Let's hear what they think. Virginia, Richmond's got a voice. Let's hear what they think. And as a community, we come together and we talk about this beautiful thing that we love. Because, there's no retirement in hip hop, man. You're gonna die in hip hop, dude. That's just what you're gonna do. You're gonna die doing what you love doing.
I think a lot of us forgot how beautiful it was, man. One thing, somebody hit me up yesterday. Every day, every other day, whenever it's relevant, I'll post up a record and say 32 years ago today this dropped or whatever. And, the conversations that spawns, when I do that, it's never a, hey, I know everything, I know this. I never do it for that reason. It's just to remind you that, hey, don't forget this thing is a multi-billion-dollar industry today, but don't forget its humble beginnings. Don't forget how you felt when this dropped or that dropped. A lot of people appreciate that because I think we forgot. When we came on, you said something about it moving so fast. It came in with a few hot records and we didn't know where it was going, and then before you knew it, it was Yo MTV Raps and it was this and it was awards and it was that, and then it was everywhere. It's America's music. If you pull into a gas station and you hear somebody blasting music, it's probably rap, and it's probably not a person that looks like me and you. The world loves it. It's gotten so big, but sometimes you need to be reminded, hey man, remember where you came from, remember how great this was. And that's why I do what I do that's one of the many reasons that I do what I do. So, we can remember, but you got to be reminded sometimes. Hey, look, as you have these discussions about what's great and why it's great, remember that everything goes back to a source, and your favorite rapper has a favorite rapper who had a favorite rapper, and you trace all the way back and it goes all the way back to that source. I'm just saying, don't forget the source.
KRS-One said it beautifully. Rap is something you do.
Hip hop is something
you live.
Sure.
And for a lot of us, and I speak for myself right now, and I'm speaking for a lot of people in the city, hip hop is all we've known. We live it. I mean, there's people that literally go home, okay, how old they are, and they go home and write or make a beat or still graph writing as they was when they was 11 years old. And they're youthful in that. Like, it's the one thing that is like brings you together with strangers that you would never normally talk to have anything else in common. It's the one unifying factor. It's like a reason to love. Like, it's a reason to share. Hip hop is one of those things that it's a turkey on the table, man. You just want to sit down and eat. Like, it's just one of those things that is, it's so important. And how could you not want to learn the thing to your earlier point, if you love it, give yourself an opportunity to learn it more, because there's so much to learn, and there's people like yourself. That's why I wanted to bring you on the show. I see the work you're doing. I love that shit. I think it's important not only for DC, Virginia, but I think it's important for Orlando to see brothers like yourself dedicating their lives to something that at the end of the day, there's not a price tag in the world that will quantify all the hours, all the life you've had in hip hop. It is priceless. And it takes courage to believe in something like that, to even go to support something like that all your time. Because the world is trying to beat it the hell out of you. Oh, grow up. That's young kid stuff, man. Get a real job. You know, you hear all the world will beat hip hop out of you sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And that's why, to your point, and I'm running long here, but I'm saying you said, remember where you come from. That's why poverty always unifies people. When you ain't got nothing, man, it's so much easier to love. You know, it's so much easier to remember the great things in life, like hip hop, and how it made you feel. Like there was no
Oh,
agenda.
definitely.
You just wanted to do it. You just wanted to do it. You
It
just
came from such humble beginnings. Now, everybody's making money and flossing, and I got this and I got that, but it came from very humble. It was never about what you had. People talked about material things, but it was almost fantasy like, from the first records. I got a color TV so I could see the Knicks play basketball. I
right.
got this kind of car. Nobody really thought that, and the things that these guys were talking about, anybody could get it. I mean, okay, you got a color TV, it's 79, but any of us could get a color TV, so, nobody was saying, I got a Benz and I got this and I got that, even if they were, it was not believable. It was,
Right.
it was in the
There were,
same
there were
fantasy.
affirmations. It's what we see on Facebook and the memes all day. People affirming what in their mind would be their heaven or their way out.
And they were
And
saying these things on the same song that they were talking about. I met Superman and took Lois Lane from her. You saw that. You saw their color TV and their if my Mercedes break down and dog my grill, I'm gonna drive up my new Seville. You never really felt like whatever. But now it's a more personal thing of the rappers really saying, "Hey, I got this and you don't have it," and they're saying that to the person that's buying their record. So it's a I remember Kanye West had a song. And one of the lines was, "What you think I rap for? To drive a RAV4?" I'm like, wow, look at the people who drive RAV4s that buy your record. I mean, you really said that? You really said that on the record? I never felt like that when those guys were saying what they had. I never felt like, well, you don't have anything my parents can't get. I don't know, man. I don't think Michael Jackson would have ever said, "Hey, what do you think I sing for? To live in $100,000 house?" It's a different time. We gotten. It's funny. Hip hop was always anti-establishment. We've become the establishment. I mean, Cass is bragging about their Bentley. Cass is bragging about driving Bentleys. We are the establishment.
Right. We're rooting for the haves, which is like, I mean, now mind you, communication is everything, right? When you say we're rooting for the establishment, the haves. The argument is, well, why wouldn't you want it? Well, once again, there's an exchange that's made. For every dollar, for every reward you receive, you have to work just as hard to get back the humility and the hunger, because that fills you with a lack of empathy and love for your fellow neighbor. Instead of wanting to help him, you're actually wanting to belittle him.
Yeah, you're dumping on him. So yeah, it's nothing wrong with wanting it. I think in some way we all want it, but you have to be humble with it. I mean, these cats are not the first rich entertainers ever. We grew up looking at rich entertainers on the television our whole lives, and we just never felt like, oh man, Lionel Richie just came on and took a dump on my parents. When he said, whatever about this car. So I'm just saying we just got to be a little more humble with it. But that's gonna take a lot. That's easier said than done. We into 30 years of very very overly overt materialism in hip hop, and the argument will be made, well, this is America's, America's built on blah blah blah. Yeah, but we've always survived despite what America was built on. We never let it change us into what America represented. And I think over the last 30 years, we've slipped a little bit on. Well, slipped a lot on that.
Right. As we wrap this up, man, and like I said, I could probably talk to you for hours, man. Anytime I get to talk about hip hop and the history behind it, it's just, I will walk off any job or do whatever I got to do to have that conversation. With that said, where do you feel hip hop is going now that we're approaching 2021, and what if anything can be done to maybe get a little more positivity out of it? What say you?
At the risk of sounding pessimistic, I think it's going everywhere. It literally is going everywhere. People are talking about everything, from the song that Cardi B and Meg made, a couple of months ago to people love to say there's good music out there. You just have to search for, and that is a true statement. There is some good stuff out there. There's some horrible stuff out there. It's going everywhere. To get some more positivity into it, not an easy task, because you have to remember one thing that I always say, and I heard Spike Lee say this years ago.
Well, let me put that in context.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean positivity like daisies.
I know
positivity in the sense of they're becoming a more better balance, if you will.
I understand. I know we grew up with NWA, but we also had the Fresh Prince and Biz. I get it.
Right.
Again, I believe that we're so far gone. I would hate to say there's nothing we can do about it, but it's not going to be an easy task.
Right.
Because I heard Spike Lee say a long time ago, early 90s, he said one thing that's different now about black people as opposed to historically our whole shit with music, right? Music played such a big part in the civil rights movement. It played a big part in the slaves escaping and all of that, right? Music has always been right there with us. He said when you go and listen to music from different decades or different eras, you could always tell what the people were going through at that time, right? So if you go back and listen to the music from the 60s and you listen to the great Curtis Mayfield and even some of the singers who weren't as woke as you would say today, they always had a message. And if you went back now, like a time capsule, you could say, oh man, it was a turbulent time in the 60s, or this was happening in the 70s. If you go back and listen to late 70s, Chic said clams on the half shell and roller skates. So you kind of get the idea, okay, Cass is having a good time. My boys, McFadden and Whiteheads, ain't no stopping us. There's an anthem. There was a certain feel good coming around the 80s. Listen to modern day rap 40 years from now. You really can't tell, are they having a good time? Are they flossing? Are they the remnants of the drug trade? It no longer is the thermometer of what the people are going through like it used to be. So to answer your question finally, I have to say I don't know what we could do to bring more balance, because we said several times during this, when money gets involved, things just go kind of haywire, and there's so much money involved now. I think there would have to be a reason for a young person to talk about something that's less along the lines of what everybody else is talking about. So what I mean is the guy who comes out and tries to be more independent and not talk about the cliche things that every other rapper is talking about, he's probably not going to sell a lot of records. So even the guy that's not the thug, he know the thug cat or whatever cat, he know that's where the money is. And if he's a cat who, like when we came on, he's not necessarily doing it from the heart. A lot of his motivation is I'm going to get paid and, get out of my situation. There's little motivation for that guy to be a positive. I don't think a Will Smith could be financially successful today. Right. Or Latifah made a song, "Don't Call Me a Bitch." Who you calling a hoe? UNITY. I don't think you couldn't even take that song to the radio today. So we got a lot of work to do, man. I don't claim to have an easy answer for that, and I don't claim to think that there wouldn't easily be balance put back into it. It's a lot of work. I'll give you a very honest answer. I'm not gonna sit up here and say, yeah, we just do this, because we've been saying that for like the last at least almost 3 decades, and It gets progressively worse every decade. So I think we got to do something different than what we've been doing. We got to do more than just talk about it.
Right. Well, I mean, that's plain Jane as you can get right there, man. I mean, that's the triple truth.
You got to be transparent with it, man. I am an independent thinker. I don't mind my opinion being the only one in the room it's always my opinion. I don't care if only one other person agrees with me or nobody. I'm an independent, and I don't think there's enough in hip hop or in society in general. I think it's too many follow the leader cats out here.
Right. My brother Strange says we need to stop with the ageism that is prevalent in hip hop, um, and he's suggesting that that would balance things out quicker. What say you?
I mean, yeah, again, I say that's and no respect to the person, disrespect to the person that said that. I think things like that are very simple things to say. Oh, we could stop this. Things are more complex. The generation gap that exists, first of all, is not new. There's always a generation gap. It's worse now. But
Right.
that generation gap is not just in hip hop. It's in society in general, right? So when we see the young kids, oh man, look at how they wear their clothes, blah, blah, blah. But that's already there. That's not just in hip hop. That's in just our society because everything is so much different than it was so many decades ago. So I think that would help if we stop the ageism. But like that's an easy thing. How do you stop the ageism when we look at it like, hey man, y'all ain't doing real hip hop, y'all ruin hip hop, and they look at it, man, y'all old heads don't know nothing. That's so prevalent, right? And there's right and wrong on both sides of that. You know, I won't deny that. You know, how do you just stop the ageism? You know, it sounds good.
Right. Right. Jesse says we need more of us in the position to run things on a corporate side. Absolutely. I mean, because to your point, and you alluded of saying this, and I say this all the time. You know, when I talk about radio, it's kind of like taxation without representation. If you don't hear or feel a good solid representation of your people that are making the decisions as a community, you hear this big thing about us voting and not voting. Well, if you don't vote, nothing's going to happen. Well, there's now even a more bigger footprint this round that more people voted. Things changed. So, like you, I believe a healthy amount sometimes of pessimism is good for balance. But we do need to, as a community, like I said, maybe start extending outside of our initial regions. Maybe if we start building, bridges that span outside of our state, and start coming together as a community of people that all have a vested interest in seeing hip hop move forward, then to Jesse Jazz's point, we would be able to see people like ourselves in a more powerful positions to kind of begin the dialogue or begin the changes that need to take place, where the people that are actually involved in the culture have more of a say, and not just this money machine that spits out products like they do for Walmart. Walmart is good because Walmart's whole job in life is to produce products and get that out to the general public. And there's a lot of people that don't want, even young people, man, that don't want to see that hip hop become Walmart.
Oh, definitely not. But one thing I say as well, and I was asked to come on another show in a few coming weeks, and they were talking about the murders in hip hop. Right. And I always kind of look at that funny because I don't see them as murders in hip hop. There are murders in the black community.
Right. Talk about it. Talk about it.
So like, okay, in the city that I'm in, as far as per capita, when the crack epidemic jumped off in the mid 80s to early 90s, we had the most murders per capita of any city. And there's some people here that's actually proud of that, unfortunately. So it would be nothing in the summer to see 120 murders, or in a year, I'm sorry, to see 120, or and more. So that had nothing to do with hip hop. If you fast forward to now, yeah, you hear about, oh, so and so was a rap, they happened to rap and they got killed, or even if they had a record deal, they didn't. We look, oh man, hip hop, what's wrong with hip hop? Dude, it's not just hip hop, dude. Every day in my city, you hear about at least 3 or 4 killings, and they're usually drug related and usually relegated to certain parts of the city. if that person just happened to rap, it don't mean it was like a cat that plays guitar can get killed. It don't mean that rock music is the cause.
You just said something hilarious, man. I mean, I don't know if you know you said it, but it's completely hilarious. Somebody got shot down the street. What the hell happened to hip hop? I mean, that's so. The irony is just insane.
It's not because a lot of these people I've never heard of these rappers before, which means nothing.
No. I'm saying while that's going on, there's also in stereo going on over here the concept of how easy it is for us to shoot one another.
Oh, definitely, of course, right.
Parallel, yes, they're mutually exclusive, but there's still this parallel train that goes along and adds to the funniness of why someone would say, "Oh, what happened to hip hop?" Because we only talk about what happened to hip hop when something negative happens, but not what happened to hip hop when something that needs maybe something positive needs to change.
Well, and it's not a question of what happened to hip hop; it's a question of what happened to us. And not to sound corny, dude.
Right.
Right. I gotta, as they say, keep it a bean. I gotta keep it a bean. What happened to us that is so easy for you to go and shoot another cat face off because they owe you a couple $100? Where that's not a code that necessarily existed on the level that it exists now, even 40 years ago, pre-crack era. So it's even when you listen to the music and what's in the music, if you listen to even rap music from 30, 25 years ago and listen to what goes on now, the question ain't what happened to hip hop, is what happened to us. Mos Def said something very intelligent and great on his first solo album. He had a spoken piece and he said people talk about hip hop like it's some monster up in the hills. He said hip hop is us, and it is. We get so tied up in the word hip hop and the culture. It's us and what we do every day.
Right.
It's us and what we do every day. So it ain't that hip hop is messed up. Hip hop is messed up. It runs parallel with how messed up we are. If you look at how, even look at crack, right? Look at when crack dropped. Look at what you could say on a rap record before the crack era.
Right.
Dude, when the message came out, they beeped out when Melly Mel said people pissing on the stairs. They beeped out the word piss. When Rapper's Delight was out, when Hank said I can bust you off my super sperm, they beeped out the word sperm. But during the day, you can be riding along and you can hear the chick say, I want you to eat my Rhea like groceries. And she don't say Rhea. They play the word on the radio. Right. So it becomes a thing. Again, not to sound corny, but it's not what happened to hip hop. It's what happened to us. Because as much as I love hip hop, we are people that had a lot of pride at some point and we lost it. If there was never a hip hop, we still lost that pride. So taking the word hip hop out of the equation, there are things we got to do as a people.
Right.
And the whole thing is straightened up when we do those things as a people.
Jesse Jazz says, if hip hop has the power to corrupt young minds, it also has the power to uplift them. Quote by KRS-One.
He's very true. That's very true.
Right. And you said NWA, so I definitely got to speak on that. One of the greatest albums ever made, straight out of Compton. But on that same album, not only did they have Dope Man, they had Fuck the Police, which had two different separate messages, but gave you the entire story and didn't leave anything out to chance. So that if you didn't grasp what was going on one end, maybe you would grasp it from another perspective. One of the great things about hip hop is that it allows for that space to exist, that you can see from a wide angle. And normally, in a good space, hip hop kind of sprinkles that wide view, so that you're seeing in full color. It allows for the entire stories to be told as they were meant to be told. So you're gonna get funny shit, you're gonna get fake shit, you're gonna get fantasy shit, you're gonna get the truth, you're gonna get.
And that's a beautiful thing as long as you're mature and old enough to understand what it is. So I don't want to get into an NWA thing, but I remember the World Class Wrecking Crew.
Yes, talk about that.
So of course I remember CIA. I remember the Cabbage Patch and all, the Ice Cube wrote for Dre. I remember all of that, and then I remember NWA. So my experience with NWA wasn't like, oh, they from the streets, they doing this. It was just
No,
good
no,
music.
no. That's not what I'm saying.
No, I'm not saying you were saying that. I'm just saying my thing was never like, oh, it's this and it's the most revolutionary. It was good music. It was my senior year of high school when we had our cut parties. We used to play, Compton's in the House and all of those songs. And I never took it like, oh man, those guys are really killers. In fact, I was like, wow, man, I kind of was like, how they get from where they were with this. Now I thought Eazy-E was a little more authentic on that, but some of them I was like, and this is not a recent thing where I found, I grew up on World Class Record Crew, and I was like, it's not that I didn't believe it, but I felt like, okay, these guys found a way to get in. I tell you what, one of my best friends was DJ Reddy Red from the Ghetto Boys. Rest in peace to DJ Reddy Red. He told me, he said, Jay, life started to imitate art. He said, Jay, all of the Ghetto Boys came from 2-parent households. We all made good grades, but we needed a way to get in the industry. And we took the role of the gangster rap thing.
Right.
He said the problem was when we started to represent that, real gangsters started to come to our shows. So we had to start to carry guns and stuff because we were attracting a certain element, but we weren't that element. Now, that's not me taking any street credibility from them cats because I don't, but what I will say the NWA did, not on purpose, they took the bar from, they lowered the bar, right? I don't think they meant to do it at all, but they changed the narrative from I'm the best, I'm this and I'm that to I come from this place and it's a real shitty place. What it did, I don't think they realized it would do it, was it opened up, every city got shitty places. So then every city said, well, I'm from here and we got shitty places too. And then, I'm the best MC, my DJ is this, the metaphors and everything that made a clever MC, they took the backseat. So every city, hey man, we sell crack here too. And man, the thing is with me, like, okay, at one point Chuck D said that rap music was like the CNN for the black community. Well, at one point that was true.
Right.
But it got to a point where, okay, all the projects look the same. I've done enough traveling to know when I go to DC, sometimes you can be in a decent area near the White House. You take the wrong turn, like, oh shit, how I get over here? Those projects, the projects are a government thing, right? They're government sponsored. So they look the same in every city.
Right.
So you're not telling me nothing new when you tell me in your city, they do this. They do the same thing in the projects in my city. Your projects look just like mine. So after 3 or 4 records, I get it. I get it. It's not CNN no more. After 30 years of, you telling me how many people you kill, how many chicks you do this to. Hey, I get it. Your neighborhood is just as bad as mine. When will we move on? This is the last thing I'm going to say about that. If I was just make a rhyme today and say I was funky fresh and I was deaf, you would laugh at me. You was like, that dude need to update his slang. He said he was funky fresh. But why is the N-word and bitch and every other word, when are those going to be played out? Because we 30 years into those words every other song. When is that going to be as played out as me saying I'm funky fresh? That's a rhetorical question, and I love to to know the answer to if there was one.
Well, I will quote the historian Jake Quan. I don't know the answer to that. But what I will say is that you heard that City of Orlando. You just dropped yet another bomb. There's so many things that can be done moving forward. And part of it, like I said, I'm hearing you talk. You're talking about it matter of fact. You're also giving your perspective. I just believe, man, like anything else, most fights would have been squashed if people talk. So
Communicate.
I think we're heading in the right direction with the communication. I applaud you for coming on and talking to my city about things that we love, which is hip hop, giving people better understanding about hip hop that may not have had the answers to it. And let me tell you something, brother. I have to do a part 2 with you. I have to do maybe a part 3.
Anytime, brother. Look, I love talking about this. And like I said, I love the fact that you give me the freedom to even say, look, it's not just hip hop. It is, because that is my philosophy. It's us. I'm working on a book called The Evolution and De-Evolution of Rap Music. And in it, I chronicle how rap was in the black community pre-crack era and now. Even though I I don't know if anybody still smokes crack, but we have what I call a post-crack era moral code. Okay.
Right.
So I believe that changed the game for our generation. The crack era, on many levels, it changed rap. It changed the way we do everything. And if we're not talking about that, we're not talking about nothing. We could say for another 2 decades, we need to do this and what we need to do. We need to stop saying what we need to do and do it if it's that easy.
Right. Absolutely, brother. Absolutely.
Yes,
Love
sir.
it.
Yes,
Love
sir.
it. Hey, my brother. Thank you for being on the show tonight. We went long. The show's normally an hour, but like I said, bro, you definitely you definitely earned your stripes here today, man. The city appreciates what you said tonight. I know I appreciate what you've said tonight, man, and I think we're all better that we continue to explore hip hop in a beautiful way, bro.
Yes, indeed. I appreciate you having me. It's been an honor. Anytime you want to do a follow-up or talk about any current situation, hey, man, this is, I love to do this, man. So I much appreciated, brother.
Hey, if you can hang tight on the other side.
Yes, sir.
I just want to talk to you real quick. But, hey, Jay Quan, the historian, the documentarian, the MC, the collector,
yes,
George Sound of Orlando today, man. Give it up for my brother, man. Hey, like I said, bro, this is the Sound of Orlando show. And I am your boy, Rome. Shout out to everybody on the check-in tonight, man. Much appreciated. I know we went long, but when you're talking about hip-hop and you're talking about people like Jay Quan, who just has this wealth of knowledge, you want to kind of peel back some of the layers. This is what we do, man. Shout out to everybody that came on tonight. Leah, Strange, Jesse Jazz, my man Rick, Finley, who else came on tonight? My man Rick John. Thank you for all coming on. Shout out to Seth One, man. We will be back on tomorrow. This is the Sound of Orlando. It's about hip-hop culture. Please, believe me, please come back tomorrow. Thank you. If you like what we're doing, tell a friend. Like and share, like and follow what we're doing. Once again, Sound of Orlando show.